Okay, hi everyone, here's going to be an interesting video. This is one which I quite like to do every so often. It's called Digital Camera Top Trumps. What it is, if you go onto my website, down there I've got the links to a couple of cool websites which I like to go on every so often. And this one here, if you have a little close look, DxO Mark. What it is, this company is like a company that does sensor testing. And they are really good. They really tell you everything that you need to know. So just to give you an example, you've got sensor rankings about how good or how crap some sensors are. And it's a great one to tell how good your sensor is compared to another camera that you're thinking of buying. So for example, let's go to compare sensors. We're going to go on that one. And let's compare three cameras. We'll do two of mine. One's the Fuji and it's the S5 Pro. And we'll go to another camera, which is my other camera, which is the Nikon. We'll do the D300S because that's the latest one that's out. And let's go for Canon's equivalent. This isn't a Canon bashing video or anything like that, but let's just see roughly price wise. Let's see, what's the Canon equivalent? It's about 7D, I would say. Is the same as the D300S. Let's click compare and let's see what happens. Okay, so what we should look carefully at is first of all the overall scores. The Fuji S5 Pro gets 65. The Nikon D300 gets 70. Oh, that's a good bit. Oh, and the Nikon D7 only gets 66. Oh, not quite as good as the D300S. Funny that. Okay, and the price-wise, the Nikon is about the same price. Yeah, actually, indicative price here, the Nikon is actually cheaper than the Canon. Interesting. Okay, so anyway, what we'll look is on. This is kind of show you how to use this website, which is great fun. First of all, the first thing that you've got is your ISO sensitivity. And on here, what happens is your camera will tell you it's going from ISO 100, 200, 400, 800, but it won't actually be that. It will be a little bit off, maybe a little bit above, a little bit below. It's very difficult to get it 100% accurate. And as you can see here, we've got them in the different colors and they're kind of all a little bit below the line. The most accurate one is the Fuji, and that's saying when it's at 1600 ISO, the actual ISO is 1500. The lowest one, the red one, which is the Nikon D300S, when it was saying it was at 1600, it's actually only at 1100. So that's a big difference there to note. But that's not really an important thing to really think about. The next one is the one which is important. This is your SNR, signal to noise ratio, 18%, whatever. And if you go along to the side, you can see if you go right down, the picture becomes really noisy. If you go right up, it's nice and smooth. So what you can see here is first of all, the D300S. Its ISO 100 isn't actually the same as the ISO 100 in the Canon 7D, but they're pretty much at exactly the same level. And as they go down, they're pretty much both level par, I would say. No problems there, and you can see they've got much better ISO than the Fuji S5 Pro. So if you think about each block, so let's say from there to there, that is a full stop worth of block. That is a stop as in 100th of a second compared to 200th of a second, or an f2.8 compared to an f4. And as you can see, once you get up to ISO 1600, it's the Canon seems to be doing really well. That is a whole stop more. So the ISO ability of the Canon 7D at ISO 6400 is about the same as what the Fuji S5 has at around about 2000. So it's roughly around about there. So that's pretty impressive. Now, dynamic range. The dynamic range is quite important, which you've seen when I've been talking about the RAW files and how you can really edit RAW compared to JPEG. And this is looking at the RAW files here. And what you'll see is one which is really high, and that is the Fuji. The Fuji is got an amazing, huge dynamic range. It's saying it's almost up at 13.5. Yeah, 13.5, and it doesn't really drop at all until once you get past ISO 800. So that means if you're doing portraits or anything, you know you can go up to ISO 800 and you've still got the full dynamic range that you want in your image. And then it really drops, and then it starts to suck. Nikon looks like it's got slightly better dynamic range than the Canon at its lowest ISOs, but once you get around to anywhere further than ISO 200, the Canon has held on to its ISO range a little bit better than the Nikon. Tonal range, roughly all the same. Fuji starts to suck once you get pretty high up. And colour sensitivity, the Nikon seems to be the most colour sensitive there. So yeah, that's pretty much that. So yeah, if you're shooting at the lowest ISOs possible, it looks like the Nikon has got better noise or no noise compared to the Nikon, compared to the Canon 7D. So if you're playing top trumps there, the Nikon D300S won. Let's play top trumps number 2. Okay, so here's my next top trumps one. This is the Nikon D700, which is the full frame of Nikon's, kind of slightly smaller than the D3, and then Canon's version of the kind of smaller full frame cameras, which is the 5D Mark II, its latest one. And then we've got its most up-to-date camera, which isn't a full frame, it's kind of a little bit less, and that's the 1D Mark IV. And first of all, let's look at the score. Oh, look at that! Looks like Nikon's got 80 points there. Yeah, and Canon just 79, just missing. And the most expensive one here only got 74. Not good. Oh, and let's look at that ISO ability. Oh, looks like the Nikon with 2,300 compared to the 5D Mark II only 1,800. And the Mark IV is only 1,300. Yeah, we didn't talk about that too much. ISO sensitivity, not really that interesting. Signal to noise ratio. Okay, it looks initially quite close, but what it's actually, that's over a whole stop there. Both the Canon and the Nikon seem to roughly be about a stop. Its ISO 200 is the same as the Mark IV at ISO 100. And if you look really carefully, it looks like the Canon 5D Mark II, when it's at ISO 3200, it's actually only 2100. And it's got a signal to noise ratio of 29.6. Meanwhile, the Nikon is 3200, is actually only 2500. So it's a little bit closer, but not anywhere it actually should be. And its noise level is actually, it is 29.5. So a little bit worse there, but a tiny amount, but it's actually much higher ISO. And then compare that back to the Mark IV, it's about a stop's difference worth in ISO ability. Dynamic range, all looking pretty good. It looks like the Mark IV keeps a lot more dynamic range the further on you get. But again, right at the very top, we've got the Nikon D700. Okay, here's a brilliant example of what you really get whenever you're paying a shed load of money for a camera. Some people say, oh, I can get just as good photos with my little pocket camera as I can with a full-on digital SLR. Maybe you can, but generally what you get in a sensor with the digital SLRs is much more than what you can get in one of your point-and shoots. And here's a perfect example. On the score rating here, this is the latest point-and-shoot with from Canon just now, the Canon PowerShot G12. And its overall score is only 47. Its ISO level, before it becomes noticeable, is only 161. Meanwhile, the D3S is at 3000. Meanwhile, the slightly older Canon version, the D40 or the 40D, is at 700. So it's a big difference. But let's look more interesting at the signal to noise ratio. So this is what you're really getting. So for example, the point and shoot, its noise when you're at ISO 100 is the same as what the Nikon D300S has when it's at 3200. So 100 or 3200. Big difference. 32 times difference, in fact. but only about 5 stops worth of difference. But you also notice a huge difference between the 40D and the D3S, because its ISO 100 is again the same as where the Nikon is at round about ISO, kind of around about 800 or so. Dynamic range is also a really important thing to look at, and as you can see here, the Nikon keeps its dynamic range up at above 11 EVs, even when it's at ISO 1600, compared to when the Canon is at around about ISO 400. So a good 2 stops difference there. Tonal range also, that's kind of like where your blacks and whites kind of come in. If there's no tonal range, it just kind of becomes a bit of a grey picture of the top. You've got really nice, clear images. And you can see a big difference in that there. But anyway, yeah, so what to do is I advise everyone head over to DxO Mark website and have a little play around and play camera top trumps. Okay, hope that helps. Bye.